It has been a week without historical precedent in the U.S. on the political side, an insurrection on the Capitol Hill. And of course, as we think about what lies ahead in 2021, GZERO Media and Eurasia Group put out their annual list of the risks for the year. A coup wasn't on it, but perhaps that is to be forgiven. Ian Bremmer, the founder of GZERO and Eurasia. Ian, I do want to start with your thoughts about what happened here. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. You can use any adjective you want, but where does this leave America in your view as the dust settles here? Because even today, President Trump saying he's not showing up on January 20th, which may be symbolic and it may not be. Where does this leave you?
No, we kind of knew that he wasn't going to show up. It's not a coup. It was an insurrection. More disturbingly, it was incited by the President of the United States, albeit not for much longer. And after it was over, perhaps the most shocking thing is that you had a majority of Republicans in the House still vote to oppose the will of the electors. That's the truly extraordinary thing. And we're watching the speeches. It was as if this hadn't actually happened. It's already getting normalized when, you're still engaged in counting the bodies. That's a big deal. I would also say that there are going to be very few consequences domestically in the near term, in the sense that you will probably impeach Trump a second time in the House. It will again be almost a completely party line vote. And I don't see McConnell convening Senate for that vote before the inauguration occurs. In other words, unprecedented that Trump is impeached twice, but does it matter? Aren't we just normalizing this? And then the broader point, of course, is, well, if this is what's happening in the United States and this is the new normal, what the hell do you think about that if you're Canada or Europe or Japan or, God forbid, China or Russia? That's a significant problem. That's a much deeper issue.
And something happened, of course, in the last 24 hours that needs to be addressed, and that is that President Trump issued that address, which was, temperate and pulling back on some of his more odd rhetoric around all of these issues, but ended with the words, "The journey is just beginning." Does impeachment mean he can't run again, or did we just hear that he will run again? And because that does change the kind of landscape for everybody going forward.
He's going to act like he's running no matter what. Here's the thing that disturbs me the most about all of this is that this week, the most significant things that have been done to censure the president for his actions have nothing to do with the political system. It's decisions being made by CEOs of Twitter and Facebook to deplatform him for 24 hours in the case of Twitter, for 2 weeks, maybe more in the case of Facebook. These are, not elected officials. These are the CEOs of a couple of multinational corporations that are accountable to nobody but their shareholders. And their decisions as to how they will treat Donald J. Trump as ex-president, private citizen, probably will have a greater impact in answering your question of how much power Trump is going to wield than anything that will be done by an elected official in the United States. That's pretty dystopian. Now, that's kind of a problem. That is not the way you want the democracy to run.
So, it sounds as though you would be of the view that that should not have happened. Should we be hearing more on that front from lawmakers, including President-elect Biden, that we don't stifle views? There are limits to where we draw the line, and they're pretty clear in both your country and this one about where we stop people from freely expressing themselves. Have they gone too far?
I'm actually not suggesting that it was a bad idea. I'm suggesting that the very fact that power is in the hands of those people, as opposed to the U.S. government, which has actively abdicated the idea of regulating these companies, that's a problem. The idea that Congress is so divided that they can't make a decision to censure the president for this behavior, and so the censure comes from Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, that's a problem. Now, I have no doubt that the decisions that are being made right now and that will be made will have more to do with their business futures than it does, which is very relevant to BNN, but than it will to do with American democracy. And that's as it should be for someone in that role. I don't think those should be the people that are having the greatest decisions of impact on the future of American democracy. So that I'm saying the problem is much more deeply structural. I also think that decisions that are made in the heat of these passions, I mean, I will tell you, I've seen a lot of people express very, very strong views about whether or not it was right to deplatform Trump. I don't actually have a strong view because I haven't spent enough time thinking about what the second and third order consequences of those decisions will be. And so I bet you that the people that are making the decisions aren't thinking about the second or third order consequences. You remember after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act. That created a lot of excesses, right? I mean, that's in the heat of that moment, you do things, you overreact to make sure that you never have that problem again, but you create other problems. I mean, one thing that depresses me, I used to like going to airports, right? I used to like going to Congress. These buildings were open to the public, and you could walk in and you could watch democracy happen, and you could bump into anybody there. That's not going to happen going forward. And how sad is that for the United States? How sad is that for foreigners that come in and want to actually see, and maybe they admire, one of the greatest symbols of democracy in the world, the U.S. Capitol, and that experience is not going to be admirable in the way that it was going forward. We've lost something very important as a consequence of that this week.
I want to broaden on something that you're touching on here when it comes to the reality, the structural problem that it's the tech CEOs making this call, and go back to the kind of business lens on this. One thing people are now trying to figure out, especially investors and economists, is what sort of shape of policy to expect, especially with the wins in Georgia. What does that mean? Let's just start. Big tech is one place that we would ask that question. Is more regulation, a different form of regulation, the likely outcome here?
Yes, but only at the margins. I mean, everyone is angry with big tech in the United States, but they're angry about different things. Elizabeth Warren says they should be broken up. A bunch of people think they should pay more taxes. You've got people saying they're not doing enough about free speech. Some people saying they're too intrusive in censoring free speech. You've got people that say they should be national champions and align with the United States government and the strongest they can be to fight the Chinese, who have their state-aligned enterprises, their national champions that are fighting a tech Cold War with the Americans, and we don't have access to that data market. So when you have that many people with that many different interests that care a lot, the outcome usually is you punt. You kick the can down the road. So I would be willing to bet you that by the end of 2021, these tech companies, which, by the way, are the strongest companies in the U.S. markets, and they are what is allowing us to get through the pandemic strongly and effectively, they will actually be stronger at the end of 2021 than they are at the beginning of 2021. There will be, of course, a change in policy with Biden. The most important will be a dramatic change from climate skepticism, even denialism, to a much more sustainable, driven domestic and foreign policy. There will be additional taxes, corporate taxes, and targeted taxes that he ran on for the wealthy, and that will go through. Most importantly, and the reason the markets are up, is you will see $2,000 checks and probably a $3 trillion stimulus in the first quarter that is passed to continue to provide relief for the workers, for the blue and red states nearing bankruptcy, and for the corporations that most need it. That's a significant near-term change, not because of what happened in the Capitol, but because of what happened in Georgia.